A number of my books have been books about going down rivers. There are only two ways to deal with a river. You either go down it or like up Finn or up it like Joseph Conrad's Marlowe in Heart of Darkness. And I prefer to go down the rivers rather than up. And each time that I've written a narrative about a river, I've always had to find a counter narrative to talk to it. And I've always found those counter narratives in some archive, whether it's the Wofford College archive, or I found a journal or a bunch of crazy Wofford students in 1969 in January who decided they wanted to paddle from Spartanburg to Columbia. Or in my Chattooga book, narratives about people who paddled the Chattooga long before the 70s and in the 60s from camps in the mountains of North Carolina. So in that way, libraries have been very important for me in what I do.
I'll just simply add that I spent an awful lot of time in the Haywood County Library researching my two books. The other library that I worked in was what I call the Old People's Library. I would go visit my wife's relatives and my relatives and just listen to them. And that way you catch speech rhythms and, you know, all of that sort of thing. And just on a personal note, it's quite possible that I never would have written a line of fiction if it hadn't been for my 7th grade librarian. I was reading a lot in those days, but I was reading a lot of what she considered junk. And if anybody here is a fan of science fiction, I apologize, but that's what I was reading in those days, and I was bringing a stack of it up to the check down. And she looked at me and she said, "You should be reading something better." This was a woman who was I thought she was about 7 feet tall. She was a tall woman. She wore tweeds year-round. She was Miss Stevens. And, you know, I said, "Okay." A volume of The Complete Tales of Edgar Allan Poe. It was one of those things that had been found by that old bindery in Greensboro that, you know, they came out just as green as they could be, and they had this particular odor about them. But I read that book from cover to cover, and that got me started thinking, man, this is pretty cool. So I really think I need to thank a librarian every time I find one.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the thing I like about it when I'm working on a book is you go to the library, you know, thinking you've got 3 questions you really need an answer to, and you find all kinds of other things that are more important than the things you went looking for. I went over one day, first year of working on 13 Moons, and I had 3 questions that I was hoping to answer about William Holland Thomas. So I went in, sat down, and got the stuff that I was looking for, and you know, I hadn't introduced myself or anything like that. And after about an hour, George came rolling a cart up to where I was sitting, packed with stuff. I mean, stacks of stuff. And he said, "You might find these useful." So I think I spent at least a couple of days there. And then the really unexpected thing that I got from that library trip was the ending of the book. Because I was talking to George, and he said, "You know, there's a story that when he was really old, that he used to sit on the porch and shoot at the train when it came by." But this was a guy who spent much of his adult life trying to get the railroad into Western North Carolina. And George said, "Well, you probably can't use it because it may not be true." I thought, well, this is a novel, right? So thanks again, George.
Do we have any other questions?
Go ahead.
All right, Charles. On that 13 Moons book, I read all of that, and As far as research goes, what was your main resource to go to when researching some of the traditions in our culture, in Cherokee culture, especially in the segment of Will being adopted into a clan of Yonaguskas? As you mentioned, it was the booger dance.
Yeah, the booger dance is a really interesting one. There's a good description of one from the I think it's really early 19th century or late 18th century. So I read all the descriptions I could get of them. There are descriptions of them from the 30s in a book, I can't remember the title, about Cherokee dance. But some of what I used for the mood of that and some of the just physical details, there's a dance in the mountains of Peru that the Quechua Indians do that is so similar that I have seen. They dress like, a parody of white people dress. They wear masks that are parodies of white people, facial features. They wear, the hats and long overcoats and things like that. And it's got some of that same kind of. I think the purpose of those dances was to make fun of these people who are threatening your culture, your way of life, to defuse some of the anger and fear over that. At least that's the way I was seeing those dances in the 19th century. So and I was trying to get in that scene, trying to get some of the raucousness of those dances, and I was awfully pleased when Myrtle Driver said, "You got the women right."
You did.
Anyone else has anything they want to ask?
It's such a privilege to hear all these stories and attachments and descriptions of sense of place from so many talented people tonight. And for those of us who are inspired by your creative juices, which I'm sure just naturally flow forth, do you have any special places or rituals that when you perhaps aren't as grounded, maybe just come back to Amsterdam or something, you come back and you want to kind of get back into that sense of place that you all write about so beautifully? Do you have any, just a few poignant places or rituals that you would like to share?
Just speaking for me, I try to find some water. And if it's noisy water, that's all the better. I do some lake fishing, but I really prefer to sit by a creek and just listen. Going to Catawitchee obviously was an inspiration for me in writing these books. And to get back into that kind of mood, I often go back to the park. And although I find I can write just about anywhere, if I've gotten off my feet, so to speak, if I'm out of rhythm, I can go back to the park and pick back up on that.
Writing is a sort of ceremony. I mentioned Kafka, a quote from Kafka a minute ago. Kafka also talks about ceremony when in South America, there was a group where they would have a ritual every night and they would set out milk for the gods. And there was a leopard in the jungle that became aware that milk was being set out. So that leopard would come in every night around the same time and would drink the milk. And it would come back the next day and everybody would go, "Oh, the milk is gone. The gods must be satisfied." Sooner or later, though, that leopard was found out, and then that leopard became part of the ceremony, and then the leopard became the god. And so then it was the leopard that they were setting the milk out for who stood in for the gods. The ceremony of writing takes the same sort of off-kilter track. typically you start a certain ceremony and you think that's the way to get you jump started, and then the ceremony begins to change over and over and over. Having been on the road so many years in a band, I write between 12 and 5 at night, around midnight, between about 11 and 11:30, my body starts getting really strange. I start pacing, I start walking around the house, feeling very strange, I get animated, and my brain starts chewing on things. It's because the ceremony is about to begin. And between around midnight, then I go to work. And I had to do it that way because so many years I was in a band and I have a guy, a bunch of drunk bastards in the same room asleep. So they'd be asleep in the room, so I had to go into the bathroom and close the door and let set the toilet seat down and spread out the actual poetry review and start editing, or spread out my work and start doing it. So I for a while I thought, you had to be in the bathroom before you came to work. Even today, there's a shelf of books right beside the toilet seat. You never know. It's a great place for research, by the way, second only to the library. But I think it's important to have somewhat of a ritual to write. I think everybody that's been doing it for years. I mean, I've been at it 30 years. Some of these gentlemen are older than myself. I know they've been doing it longer. But I think you got to find your own way, and we all have our own toolbox and our own tools. You got to find your own tools and to find your way to make the things that create a ceremony, that create art, and it'll live on good pasture.
These are the opening paragraphs of the opening essay in the collection of Mountain Passages. It's titled Magical Waters. And it's about the little cove where we live in West Bryson City. There's a little creek running through it. And I have a hard time writing anything in which that creek doesn't make an appearance. Can you hear me? Yeah. Almost every evening before supper, my wife Elizabeth and I stroll down the pathway below our home. This path leads almost a mile to a little waterfall. We always pause to sit a while on the bench that overlooks the cascade and the swirling pool below. Returning home, we vary the route some by crossing several footbridges that lead into and out of the pasture situated across the creek from the house. These outings take only about half an hour, but we always come back renewed, especially during the winter months. The creek never fails to lift our spirits. Creeks are essential to life here in western North Carolina as the mountains themselves. You can't have the mountains like the ones found here without the seeps, springs, branches, creeks, and rivers that form them. Flowing water was the primary agent that sculpted the mountain landscapes as we know them today. The word creek, in addition to being defined as a small stream, often a shallow or intermittent tributary to a river, means any turn or winding. Any turn or winding. The word may derive from the Old Norse kriki, meaning a bend or a nook. Bends and nooks are the essence of any creek. There are magical places where the water swirls and threads its way over and among the jungle of boulders, disappears under a cut bank, breaks its way through a sluice, curls in an eddy, and glints in the winter sun. Running water.
I'm the opposite of Keith Flynn. If you added up, if you did a survey of every word in all of these books, I would bet there's not more than 1% of them have been written between after 10 a.m. or before 5 a.m. So 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. is when I write. So early morning and coffee.
I think really important to my writing process is I spend about a good chunk of at least 100, between 100 and 150 days a year out in the woods, mostly mountain biking, where I do not think about writing.
Okay, thank you very much, all.
again no more. Oh, it's the song and the sigh of the weary. No hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. No hard times come again no more. Light and gay, there are frail forms fainting at the door. Although their voices are silent, their pleading looks must say, oh, hard times come again no more. Oh, it's the song and the sigh of the weary. Oh, hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Well, it's the cry that we hear now above the troubled wave. It's the wail that is echoed from the shore. It's the dirge that is sounded around the lonesome grave. Oh, hard times come again no more. Oh, it's the song and the sigh of the weary. Oh, hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more.
Thank you.